so excited to be able to introduce one of our colleagues, Darren Croft, Dr. Darren Croft, Professor Croft. He's from Exeter University in England.
Honour and a great privilege for me to be able to talk today and to be able to talk on behalf of the Centre, or the work that we've been doing with the Centre over the last 10 years or so. And Giles really captured nicely, and so did Ken, just how important that data is that the Centre's been collecting for conservation and for population management. But that data also is, around the world, becoming recognised as unique. And unique in its allowing us to ask some really fundamental, basic questions about evolution. And that's that I want to try and capture a bit of right now. So for the last 10 years, Ken and I have been working remotely together, and for the last 3 years I've been fortunate enough to be able to come out here. And one of the stories we've been looking at, and it's very nice we had a question about this, is the evolution of menopause. And here, I just need to clarify, we're talking about menopause as the physiological cessation of reproduction. Whales don't menstruate, so from a strict medical definition, they don't have menopause, but they do stop reproducing, as I'm going to show you through this talk, and we're starting to understand why. And understanding why is coming from the data that Ken and the Centre have been collecting over the last 40 years. This really is a huge collaborative project, and normally I put this slide at the end of talks, but I really wanted to put it at the beginning here. Obviously Ken has been the central pin around this project, but the Centre for Whale Research, and I didn't have a picture of anyone in particular there because it's all the people who have ever been at the Centre for Whale Research and contributed towards this work, and the people there at the moment. But in the current team, the rest of the pictures, Dan Franks at the University of York, Mike Camp, who's Exeter with me, we've been working with John Ford with the Northern data, Rufus Johnson, who's a mathematician, and then a team of postdocs who are working on the project currently, some of which are in the audience. But I just want to highlight Emma Foster here, and Emma really was the starting point for this project over 10 years ago when she came out to the Centre and volunteered, and then went on to do her PhD with me. And so, just to kind of follow on that story, I think Emma came out in 2004 or 5 or something. It was over 10 years ago. And I happened to meet Emma in Bangor in North Wales, which is just this top red spot here. And I had been employed as a lecturer in animal behaviour, and the day I arrived, it was a little bit late today actually, I was told, actually Darren, you're going to have to teach a course in marine mammal behaviour. And if anyone knows my CV, and you probably don't, you realise that I perhaps wasn't the best person to teach a course in marine mammal behaviour. I did my PhD on fish. So it was a real shock to me, but a fascinating insight into just how interesting this group of animals is. And Emma really opened my eyes to this. I moved to Exeter, which is where I am now, it's the blob at the bottom of the UK, and Emma came down and did her PhD with me and has since gone off to have a very successful career working for Natural England, which is a conservation environmental management organisation in the UK. When I was talking to Emma, I just became incredibly excited about what the Centre had been doing then over the last 30 years, now over the last 40 years. In that it's absolutely unique to have this long-lived social mammal tracked in the wild with that level of detail. There isn't anywhere else really I can think of in the world where we've got this for a marine mammal of that complexity. And so we can just see here pictures at the start of the study and pictures from the current day. And Ken highlighted that in his talk as well. Not only that, we've got information of the matrilineal structure, so the relatedness of individuals in groups, who's related to whom. Again, that's a really rich wealth of information for us to start asking questions about. Not only that, when these guys have been going out in the water, they've been collecting video and photographs. So we've actually been able to go back and look at those photographs and look at that video and analyse it and ask about social structure. And I will highlight some of that in the talk later on. And if this runs, we can start to identify individuals in the photographs or in the videos from the photo ID, and so we can start to ask about behaviour, which is incredibly exciting. So you guys are here to hear about killer whales, so why on earth am I showing you a picture of an Asian elephant, a primate and a human, and then we can see some whales in the bottom. And really this captures the essence of why I think this population is so exciting and the work that Ken has been doing is so important. So I'm interested in senescence, and that senescence is death. I'm interested in why our bodies die and why they age. And in most animals, we have somatic senescence, that's our body, and we have reproductive senescence, and they move along at about the same rate. So our reproductive organs senesce about the same rate as our rest of our body. And I can illustrate that by looking at these two figures for the elephants. So if you look at the line, the solid black line here, we have the rate of reproductive senescence, and the dashed line is the somatic senescence. And the thing just to note here, and this will become clear as we start to go along, is they just kind of meet on about 70 years old. So elephants are having offspring until the end of life. Exactly the same is true for chimpanzees and non-human primates, but in these populations, females continue to reproduce until the end of life. As you will know, humans stand out against the rest of non-human primates. If you look at the senescence now, which is the dashed line, which is their longevity, their life expectancy, against their reproductive pattern, then they have this peak of fertility in midlife, and then this period at the end of life, against which they're not reproducing, and so they go through the menopause, and they have this post-reproductive lifespan. There's a huge debate that's gone over the last 20 years in medical literature as whether or not this is just an artifact of the fact that we now have modern medicine and healthcare, and whether or not this really is, or whether or not this really is an evolved adaptation that's deep-rooted in our evolutionary past. And that's a really difficult question to answer, really tough, because modern societies have healthcare, they have medical care. There wasn't Ken walking around 500 years ago collecting data on our societies when they actually had natural mortality and no fertility. Now, this is where the killer whale story becomes absolutely fascinating, because from this data, this is an early photograph with Ken out on the water sampling these whales. From this data, we can construct the same graph for these resident killer whales. So this is a graph for the southern residents. And look at how big that gap is between those two lines. So what that means is that this is their reproductive profile here, stopping in their 40s, and this is their longevity, possibly living until they're 100. So they have this post-reproductive lifespan, and this is really significant if you think about it. We've just heard about how difficult it is for these animals, how their salmon has reduced, pollution, how their population is actually under threat. This isn't a study system that's benefited from modern medical care. This is one that's on its way down. And so actually to be able to see that gives us even more support and even more evidence that these whales have evolved what we're going to call menopause here, that they've evolved a post-reproductive lifespan. And interestingly, there's another species as well, the short-fin pilot whale, and I've not put the graph up here, that looks very similar. So cetaceans can tell us, we think, a great deal about our own evolution. And I just pull this up because we did get into a little bit of a debate with SeaWorld in the literature about the robustness of these observations. And so SeaWorld were very keen to claim that killer whales don't have menopause, killer whales don't live that long. This is all due to possible errors in age estimation. And their argument is that when these studies started, we didn't know the age of the whales, and these whales had to be estimated. So working with some mathematicians, we actually looked at what the possible consequences are of error estimations that are way bigger than ever would be biologically possible. And if we do that, we still see this pattern. So no matter how critical SeaWorld is of the age estimations, these killer whale population goes through menopause, and there's absolutely no doubt about it. And this was quite high profile. It's been covered by Nature. Scientists flash over the lifespan of captured whales, and we're continuing to work against that and to promote actually the notion that the data from the field really are robust and really can tell us important things. But to bring us back to this pattern and just to kind of emphasize it in this figure here, we can see here, this is just a survival plot. So this is the probability of survival as we get older. So when we get down here, no individuals are alive. Up here at 1, all individuals are alive. Males die younger than females. Females have their reproductive period about here, but have the incredible post-reproductive lifespan that spans from when they're around 40 years old, possibly definitely 80, possibly until they're 100, which is over half of their lifespan is spent post-reproductive. From an evolution perspective, that's absolutely baffling. Why should an individual who think about sharing our dreams, transmitting our genetic material to the next generation, why on earth should you give up the opportunity to have your own offspring midway through life? Okay? The key to understanding this comes from understanding the social structure of these killer whales, which is only possible through this long-term photo identification work that's been done. Parallel to this, we've been working with some mathematicians and some people who can simulate, because we can't observe evolution at this scale, because it happens too slowly, we can simulate evolution in a computer. We can ask and we can make predictions. We can develop models and make predictions for how individuals should behave, to understand how this can evolve. I apologise, the colours are not very clear on here, but if you imagine you have two matrolines, matroline A and matroline B, I don't need to tell you guys this, but it's important to the theory. These females are mating with males from different groups. The males stay with their own group, and what that means is that when a male reproduces, his calf is reared by another group. When a female reproduces, the group carries the cost for rearing that calf. So if a son reproduces, there's no cost to the group, because if a son reproduces, another matroline carries the cost of rearing that calf. If a daughter reproduces, there's a cost. So running some really simple models, we can start to predict actually that females should invest more in their sons than their daughters, because if a son reproduces, there's no cost to the group, and so therefore they can gain more in what we call inclusive fitness. They can transfer more of their genetic material through their sons than they can through their daughters, because they have a higher reproductive potential without actually getting into conflict within the family group. So, using some maths, we can make a prediction, and then using this fantastic data, we can start to test this prediction. So using these photographs that we can identify, we, not me, put my hands up now, this is Dave, Ken and the team at the centre and Emma, identifying the individuals in these pictures, and we can start to construct social networks, which have really been developed in sociology to understand human societies. And if we do this, we can start to build these networks across this entire 40-year database and start to ask about how these societies are structured. And here you can see a social network for the southern resident population. Size, this is a node, so that's an individual. The size is its age. The colour is sex, so blue males and the red colour here females. And the lines are their social ties. So this represents their social associations. So we can ask, do mothers have stronger bonds with their sons than their daughters? And this is some unpublished data, but they do. So if we subject this to statistical tests, we find it significant, but the key thing is, this is the strength of this social relationship here, and it's stronger with sons than with daughters. This bar, the line goes higher. So what's the consequences of this? What does this mean? This doesn't tell us about menopause. This doesn't tell us about why these females are around. So I ask you a question. How much is your insurance premium, and how does the insurer know how much to charge you? And they know that by looking at your history for the population demography, the rate of birth and death, and risk factors, which would include things like smoking or alcohol or neighbourhoods, are taken into these calculations to predict a mortality hazard. So my chance of dying in the next 10 years can be calculated from something called a life table. We can use exactly the same statistical approach to ask questions about what determines the mortality hazard of these killer whales, and whether or not these post-reproductive females increase the survival of their offspring. So we had this really great paper that came out in 2012, where we actually looked at this. So this is just simply plotting the survival here. So just to explain, this is time in years, moving along this axis here. And on this axis here, we have probability of survival. So everything starts at 1 because everyone's alive. And if you get down to 0 here, everyone's dead. And you've seen this type of figure before. This is just showing that males, okay, have a higher chance of mortality than females. The black line progresses faster downhill than the red line. We can ask what happens if the mother dies when the offspring's aged 15. So using this data, using this type of statistical approach, we can say, okay, what happens if this mother dies when the offspring's aged 15? You'll see this black line's dropping. Males here, their survival is being reduced if their mother is no longer around, their post-reproductive mother. And if they're 35, I find this absolutely staggering. You know, males, this is near the end of the past what would be their mean lifespan. They're absolutely dependent on their mothers for survival. These fully grown males hanging out with their mothers, they've got this strong social bond. If she disappears, his chance of mortality increases by 8 times in the year following her death. So if he loses his mother, there's an 8-fold increase that he's going to die in the year after she dies. That's absolutely staggering, that she really is keeping these old males alive. And the effects on females are much smaller. So if the mother dies when the female's 15, when her daughter's 15, there's no effect really on her survival. Very small effect. And if the mother dies when the female's 35, there's a small effect. It's nothing like the male. So these old females really are keeping their sons alive. So this was really the first analysis using this data to show that menopause can be adaptive and that there's a reason why old females are alive in the population. So it's a really major finding that came from this long-term database. The next question for us was, well, how? What is it these females are doing? How could they possibly be helping to provide that survival advantage? How could they be keeping their offspring alive? I don't need to talk you guys through this slide because you know all about it. Salmon are really important. Salmon vary in space and time. And we know in other long-lived social mammals, old females in the population, in elephants for example, are really important as repositories for information. If you think about how we move through life, we learn routes, navigation routes, we learn how to navigate social situations, and younger people often learn from older people. Our hypothesis was that these old females may actually be storing information, for example, of where and when to find salmon. The nice thing about the data is we can actually turn to the data and ask this question. So Emma, bless her socks, watched 751 hours of video recording who was swimming behind whom. And by doing this, we were able to look at which whales, and this is a shot where the whales are actually clustered close together. Often the lead whale is much further in front here. Which whale is at the front? So which individual is at the front? And then we can ask what the traits, what the characteristics of those whales, what their age, what are their sex. Our hypothesis being, actually, if these old mothers, if these post-reproductive females are important, they should be out in front, guiding the group around in these inshore waters to find salmon. And so we can analyze our data. This is now a network of leadership, whereby the pink nodes are females, the bluish nodes are males, the size of the node is the age of the female, and this line to an individual means it followed that individual. But we can analyze this statistically, and we can just look at account of leadership here, and time spent leading. And the main thing to see from this graph here is that the female line comes out this side here of the blue plot, and that females are spending more time leading than males. So females are out at the front of these groups, guiding the group around these inshore waters where they're looking for salmon more than males. That's interesting in itself. We can then ask if reproductive or post-reproductive females are the ones doing the leading. Same graph. Here we have the reproductive females here in the white, and the post-reproductive females highlighted in the red, reddy-pink colour. So post-reproductive females are the ones out in front of the group leading around these foraging grounds. So there's really strong evidence here that they're acting as repositories for ecological knowledge and guiding their offspring around. Salmon is absolutely critical. We saw a fantastic figure from Giles showing the relationship between salmon abundance and mortality. Well, finding salmon is going to be a challenge when it varies in space and time. You've got to know when to come into the inshore waters to feed. We've got really strong evidence here that that knowledge is accumulated in these older females. If these older females are lost from the population due to accumulation of pollution, etc., that's going to have unconsidered knock-on consequences for their ability to find food. So, do sons follow more than daughters? We found this effect in our survival analysis, whereby sons are more likely to die than their daughters when their mother dies. So is there any evidence that sons follow their mums more than their daughters? And yes, there is. So if you look at the leadership, the following behaviour of males and females, if it's not their mother, males and females follow about the same rate. If it's their mother, males, the grey bar here, spend significantly more time following their mother than do their daughters. So there's really good evidence here that part of the reason the males may suffer higher mortality is because they're actually dependent on their mothers to find salmon, to lead them around these salmon foraging grounds. We can go even further than this, because we can ask, okay, there's variation in salmon across time, and Giles showed this fantastic plot where this salmon fluctuates. So the pressure to find salmon isn't the same every year. Some years there's lower salmon than others. So how does that abundance affect the leadership? And I just show this graphically, but I can talk about the statistics later. In years of low salmon, these post-reproductive females lead even more. In times of need, that's when they're really leading. What can this tell us? Why do I get so excited about this? Think about our own evolutionary history that it's hard to look back into. In hunter-gatherer societies, before Google, before the internet, before written text, when we actually had to ask people things, rather than just asking Google, we would ask the elders. We would go to the elders in the community. We think about where traditional hunter-gatherer communities still exist. Those elders are absolutely central. If they lose their teeth, people masticate food. Their family will masticate food and feed them. They're certainly not pushed to the outside of society. They're right at the centre. If there hasn't been a drought for 40 years and they need to find food, you've got to have somebody who was around 40 years ago to ask where the food is. So we see this in traditional human societies, that the elders are really key to the society. And by understanding how important they are in these whales, it helps to reinforce how important older people are in our societies and have been in our evolutionary past. And storing information could be key to understanding human menopause. Okay, so that's a bit of an evolutionary journey into how we can use this data to ask some really basic science questions, which I find absolutely fascinating. And we think it's this unusual family life, so the fact that there's no dispersal by sons or daughters from the maternal line, which really can help to explain why this population has evolved menopause. And interestingly, I mentioned short-fin pilot whales at the start. They've got the same social structure. It really is almost unique. Normally in mammals, one sex disperses. It's either males or females. It's very unusual for both sexes to live together their entire life. We've shown statistically post-reproductive females boost the survival of their offspring, and that sons benefit more than daughters, and that one way they do this is by providing knowledge. I asked this question without time to answer it, but just to tell you what to look out for in terms of the next chapter of this story, because I haven't actually told you or explained to you why they stop. Elephants acquire ecological knowledge through life, yet they continue to reproduce to the end of life. Why do females have to stop reproducing to be able to show their sons where to find salmon? There's a missing part to this puzzle, and that's what we're working on at the moment. Why stop? I should say it explains why they live such a long time, but not why they stop. So, it's been an amazing 40 years of which I've not been part of. If I was setting out now trying to ask these questions, I would be Ken's age, older than that, before I had the data to be able to do this. I can't emphasize just how valuable this resource is to science. And we're only halfway through this study, really. You know, the oldest whale in this study from birth to death is 40 years old. The minimum lifespan the lowest estimate for the oldest female is going to be 80. We need to go for at least another 40 years before we've measured and observed the female go from birth to the maximum possible lifespan. So we're already really halfway through. Ken's only got it started, really. And just to stress again, this data set is really the foundational data set for every study in this region on these whales. And that comes from the centre, and it comes from the generosity of the centre for sharing data. We're moving into a new environment, a new climate, technological advances, drones. Wow. You know, these guys have done so much by looking at things from the side. You get a bird's eye view, and it's like taking the lid off the fish tank. It's going to be amazing, absolutely incredible. So the next 40 years is going to be really exciting. We're going to be able to look at social interactions. It's almost like primatology 50 years ago, you know, where we just had some insight into group structure, but we didn't understand the relationships within groups. That's what we've got currently. We've got information on who swims with whom, but not really information on how they interact, who shares food with whom, how they're aggressive, who mates with who babysits who. To do that, we need to be able to see behaviour. If we can see from above, I think we can do that. And this continued data collection is really critical for conservation, but I stress again just how unique this population is and this data set for addressing these big questions in science. And it really is absolutely incredible. How can you help? The last 40 years has been driven by really largely one person's vision in order to make this happen. Going forward though, I think we can all play a role in this, and we can all play a role in making this happen. Spread the word via social media, through your friends, through your networks, just how important this data set has been, and the science, the really exciting science, both from a conservation perspective, but also from a blue skies perspective, fundamental questions that's coming out of here. Become a member, support the centre. You can go online, you can log on, it doesn't cost very much. You get access then to the latest updates from the centre, you get access to the papers, you get access to the science, become a part of the community. You can even do it outside at the desk, I think. Make a donation now or the future. This data is collected, and to collect the data is expensive. It requires boat time, people time, and that's why it's unique. Because it's so hard to sustain a study like this for such a long time period. It needs support from people to be able to do this. And as Giles mentioned, there's a new sightings database which is really exciting. The fact you're possibly going to be able to use this phone to ID whales, wow. That's going to completely change data collection for us. We'll know where the whales are, who they're with. It's going to be absolutely incredible. Become an ambassador for the southern resident killer whales, and by becoming an ambassador, become an ambassador for the centre. Log in to use this app, register your data with the centre, and contribute to this long-term study and to this data collection. And finally, I just want to draw your attention to, if you're interested in learning more about this and what I've talked about, this is Ken and I on the boat yesterday with a film crew from the BBC from the UK, and they're making a Radio 4, half-hour Radio 4 slot, which will go on the 10th of August, and a short online film, which will be available for you guys here in North America as well. And there's a number of tags, Twitter and Facebook, the Centre's Facebook page there. Follow us if you want to. You know, you'll get regular updates of what we're doing, both from our papers and our outputs, but from the centre. And the future is a really exciting one. We've got some fantastic further insight to make here. We're only part of the way through. And I think that's everything from me. I did the acknowledgements at the start, so thank you very much for inviting me.
Double. Oh, over here.